They're doing their job, and it's a good question. I thought it was an obvious question to be answered, that it wasn't the whole thing, but I could see how it could mislead someone, especially if it's the first one that you're going through. So whoever wanted to know the answer to that, whether it's one juror or all of them, very clear statement from the judge, as always, by the way. But I think the most it tells us is really about the timing of this, that it was not going to be a super fast verdict today.
Yeah, something else to factor into that verdict. It's been 9 hours. Some folks online are a little worried about that. I'm like, no way. This is one that's going to push out, I think, probably to what we know is maybe a Friday verdict. You know, that could happen in this case. But they have all 6 weeks of evidence with them. That's not something we see in all our cases. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's great. I love that the judge does that. It gives us less insight into what they're focusing on, but in terms of a jury being able to look at evidence, review evidence as much as possible and kind of do it themselves. I mean, when I practiced in New Jersey, we did that. We sent everything back with the jury, except you wouldn't send a gun back there, but you would send the regular evidence so they don't have to ask for every little thing. So I love the way the judge did that. I think it makes the jury more efficient and more able to get to the truth, which is what we want. I mean, if it's evidence, let them see the evidence. Let them look at it as much as possible and review it and discuss it, argue about it if you have to. But the fact that they have it, I think, actually makes it a quicker process for this jury. They don't have to ask for everything. They have a question about a picture, a recording. They've got it, and I think that's a great idea.
Fair enough, and I tend to agree with you. All right, finally, what's coming up on the show tonight?
Tonight? Well, if the jury comes back, I'll be the only one here. But the jury's not deliberating. So we're going to break down a whole bunch of things here. First of all, we're going to take a look at the tears. Amber Heard, in their closing argument, Camille Vasquez was saying that there were no real tears in that courtroom. So we're going to take a look at the video. We're going to take a look at the still photos and bring in our experts to ask and hopefully answer the question, did she actually cry?
Well, we heard on the stand during the trial that she had trouble crying from her acting coach. So I'll be looking at that, as will everyone else. Vinnie Politan, thank you so much for that. We look forward to your show coming up next. I'm Michael Ayala. And as I said, up next, Vinnie Politan returns with closing arguments live from Fairfax, Virginia. So keep it right here on your front row seat to Justice.
The jury has heard all the evidence and allegations made by Johnny Depp and Amber Heard. Now they must decide who's telling the truth.
No matter what happens, I did get here, and I did tell the truth, and I have spoken up for what I've been carrying on my back reluctantly for 6 years.
I have to relive this every single day that I have to address those claims. Over and over again, the most intimate, embarrassing, deeply humiliating and personal things that I've survived are used against me every day. Over and over again. It's torture. I'm in so much pain, emotionally.
Tonight, the latest from the courtroom as the jury asks a question.
The question is, does question number 3, the statement is false, pertain to the headline, I spoke up against sexual violence and faced our culture's wrath, or does it pertain to the content of the statement, everything written in the op-ed?
And we take a closer look at the emotional testimony of Amber Heard. Johnny Depp's lawyers say she never shed a tear. So tonight, we ask the question, did she cry?
I could just feel this pressure. It was like it kept hitting me. It didn't feel pain. It was just a pressure on my pubic bone.
Plus, a lot of memes and posts on TikTok raising questions about what was really happening in court. Tonight, we get to the truth of some of the TikTok allegations. We are live at the courthouse as the jury continues deliberations in Johnny Depp versus Amber Heard. I'm Vinnie Politan. Thank you so much for joining us here on Closing Arguments. We are live outside the courthouse in Fairfax County, Virginia, where today the jury, a full day of deliberations, the clock up to over 9 hours, and no, they have not yet reached a verdict. If they did, the tie would be red tonight. It would not be blue, okay? Remember that. Anyhow, so this jury doesn't have the easiest job in the world. You think about what happened behind me during the course of 6 weeks. It can be very confusing because Johnny Depp and Amber Heard both testified about what happened. But Johnny said one thing happened and Amber said something else happened. So the jury now is left with, well, who are we supposed to believe? Who's telling the truth? And that's a big challenge to figure out in this case. There's no burden of beyond any and all reasonable doubt. They've just got to weigh it and figure out whose version of what happened is the truth of what happened here. So you have the two parties to the litigation, Amber Heard and Johnny Depp, getting up on the stand and telling the jury what they believe happened in this relationship. What happened in Australia, on the Orient Express and everywhere else, Penthouse 4, Penthouse 5, in the lobby, you know, wherever. They told their stories. Then their attorneys got up there and gave their closing arguments, and the closing arguments really about what it means. So the attorneys take the set of facts that have been put forth through their witnesses, primarily their clients, and then explaining to the jury what it means in terms of the allegations here of these cross complaints of defamation. So that's their job. Meanwhile, like 1 million or 1 billion people on TikTok are telling us all what really happened in this case, right? And we're going to get into that a little bit later this hour. But a lot of opinions out there, obviously. I have opinions. Everybody's got an opinion about what took place inside the courthouse. But at the end of the day, you know it, I know, we all know it. There are only 7 who matter in this case. And those are the deliberating jurors. They will determine what happened, what really happened, and what it all means when they deliver their verdict. It didn't happen today, but we did hear from the jury today. They had one question only. They sent it out to the judge. The judge read it in open court. Take a listen.
It's basically in regards to number C, items 1 and 3, and number C is a jury instruction on the finding instruction for the online article title. The question is, does question number 3, the statement is false, pertain to the headline, I spoke up against sexual violence and faced our culture's wrath, or does it pertain to the content of the statement, everything written in the op-ed? So I think the confusion came in this particular one because the statement in question is the title of the op-ed. So I think they're just confused as whether it's the whole op-ed or just the title is the statement. And it's clear that the title is the statement. So I was going to answer to say the title is the statement in question for number 3. Does that seem appropriate to everybody?
Which they phrased as headline as opposed to title. But
Right, because the headline is the alleged defamatory statement. So I can say the statement is the headline, and not the entire op-ed. Is that what you want me to say? All right.
Thank you.
The statement is the headline, not the entire op-ed. All right. I will send that back to them.
By the way, at this point of any trial that I've covered in the last couple decades or so, this is an opportunity to try to get inside that jury room and try to figure out what they're talking about and what the big issue is. This question, I don't think there's any way to read into it if it's better for Johnny Depp or Amber Heard, but I think it gives us a little bit of insight into the process of the deliberations and where they may have been at the time that they asked that question. So let's bring in Court TV legal correspondent Chanley Painter, who is with me outside the courthouse here in Fairfax. Chanley, great to see you. It's always a long day for Chanley, so we appreciate it, folks.
No problem.
We appreciate her staying late for us. So how about the special verdict forms? Let's go through that a little bit so we understand what this jury is working on and the questions they have to answer.
Sure. So the question they asked in court actually had to do with part of the jury instructions on page 4, or number C as it is. We have it to show. And it's only page 4 of the jury instructions, like I said, but it does mirror the special verdict forms that they're going and filling out. So it is parts 1 and 3, the statement or the headline of the op-ed is at issue, and number 3, which is the statement is false. And they really wanted to know whether that had to do with just the headline or the entire op-ed. So she clarified that by sending it back to the jury. So we also pulled up those special verdict forms, as you mentioned, that echo those same 7 subparts that they have to agree on, yes or no for each of the parts. So 3 statements for Johnny Depp. He's suing Amber Heard, saying these 3 statements in the op-ed are defamatory. And they have each, this is a page for each of those 3 statements. There's also a page to consider damages if they agree that one or more of those statements is defamatory. Same for Amber Heard. So she has another 3 statements she countersued Johnny Depp for, and they have to go through 7 subparts for each of those 3 statements. And if they say yes to one or more of those statements as defamatory, they move to the damages part of this form. So a lot for this jury to sift through.
I'm counting it up. I think it's 46 total questions if they have to answer all of them. I was doing it in my head, folks. 46, I think, is the number. So the significance also, though, of the question that they did ask is that refers to the absolute first page of the special verdict form.
Yes, the very first statement that they would consider in both the jury instructions and the special verdict form, which is the title of the op-ed.
Which tells me that maybe if they're going in order on the special verdict form, they started on page 1. A great place to start. So to me, that was sort of significant. And again, we're reading their minds. They can do whatever they want. They're not going to tell us. Maybe they'll tell us afterwards. Some news today, though.
Yes.
Johnny Depp's team filing a motion. Like, what are they filing? Can we just get the verdict first? What are they doing?
Right. They actually want to take issue with some of the arguments made during the closing arguments of Amber Heard's team, and they want to revise the verdict forms. Well, they tried at least. So here's part of this motion. It's a motion to strike defendant's inappropriate argument made during closings and to instruct the jury to disregard those inappropriate arguments. They also want to modify the special verdict forms to more accurately reflect the jury instruction forms, and they particularly have issue with this part of Ben Rottenborn's closing argument. Let's watch.
A ruling against Amber here sends a message that no matter what you do as an abuse victim, you always have to do more. No matter what you document, you always have to document more. No matter whom you tell, you always have to tell more people. No matter how honest you are about your own imperfections and your own shortcomings in a relationship, you need to be perfect in order for people to believe you. Don't send that message. That's what he wants you to send.
Depp's team argued in its memorandum to that motion that it's inappropriate to ask a jury to send a message.
I think they're right. I think they're right. The trial's not about sending messages. No, it's about what happened inside the courtroom. The problem is, at this point, it's not going to change anything.
Right. In fact, I think we have what the judge said about it today during the reading of the question from the jury. Let's watch that.
While we're waiting for that, Mr. Chu, I did get your motion. I'm not ignoring you, but I am kind of ignoring you because since the jury has the case now and it's out of my hands, I appreciate your motion, but I'm not going to entertain it at this time, okay?
Thank you, Your Honor.
She's not going to entertain it at this time, Vinnie. It's out of her hands. It's in the jury's hands. So sounds like it was filed maybe for potential appellate purposes if needed.
Right, yeah, and there could be an appeal. You know, we don't know who's going to win. We don't know who's going to lose. We don't know what the jury's going to say. We're waiting for all that. So you're inside the courtroom today. What did you notice?
Not a lot going on inside this courtroom.
It was empty for a while.
Yeah, the crowd not as big as usual here, of course. I think there were 15 who had wristbands this morning in line. It's a drastic difference from what's the usual number, 150, right? So not a lot of people out and about this courthouse, but inside, we didn't even get to see the jury because they send a note, Vinnie. The foreperson writes out the note, they give it to the deputy who gives it to the judge who calls in the attorneys to talk about an answer, and then she writes the answer and sends it back to the jury. So we didn't get to have our eyes on this jury panel working hard again, 5 men, 2 women on the panel trying to determine this case.
But they did kind of leave a little early. They wanted to leave a little early today.
They did a little bit earlier, about 10 minutes before they would usually leave.
It tells me one of 2 things. One, they hit a point where, all right, we're not getting this done. We're not agreeing. We got to get out of here. Or they agreed and they said, let's sleep on it tonight and deliver our verdict in the morning.
Very possible.
We shall see. Remember, verdict can happen when, Chanley?
Anytime.
At any time. Chanley Painters, we'll talk to you again in just a little bit. Want to bring in a special guest joining us tonight. She is a senior news reporter for Page 6. She's coming to us out of Miami tonight. Eileen Reslin is with us. Eileen, thanks so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you for having me.
All right, here's the question I have. I want to know, and a lot of people want to know, Hollywood, celebrities, other stars. This is a trial about 2 stars. What are other people saying? Are Hollywood celebrities taking sides here as we wait for this verdict?
There are a select few that are taking sides, and understandably so. A lot of them are very hesitant to speak out. They don't want to say the wrong thing and kind of get caught up in the middle of this mess. But some that have spoken out are people that have worked with Johnny Depp in the past, like Eva Green. She starred with him in Dark Shadows in 2012, and that was around the time that he started dating Amber Heard. And she said, of course, that, spoke very highly of him, that he'll be vindicated. And a lot of comedians coming out to support Johnny Depp. Chris Rock in his stand-up joked about it fresh off of his Will Smith slap, saying that, believe all women, but don't believe Amber Heard. Also, Bill Burr has backed Johnny Depp up. He's admitted, though, that he hasn't actually watched a lot of the trial because he's too much of a Johnny Depp fan, but he thinks he'll come out victorious. And obviously the biggest person that is a celebrity that's made the biggest statement is Kate Moss, who dated Johnny Depp from 1994 to 1998. She testified in favor of Johnny Depp, saying that any allegations that he shoved her down a flight of stairs, which Amber Heard implied in her testimony, are just simply not true. So that was very, very important for the Depp side. And of course, Amber Heard has had a couple of people that also have supported her. Howard Stern called Johnny Depp a narcissist because he wanted this trial to play out on TV. And also Ellen Barkin actually testified for her side. She dated Johnny Depp very briefly, but I'm not quite sure if Ellen Barkin's testimony really has much meat to it, because she said that Johnny Depp tossed a bottle of wine in her direction, but she never actually made any abuse allegations. But still, some star power for the Heard side right there. And lastly, for Amber Heard, was Julia Fox. She might be well known now for dating Kanye West. And she said that, Amber Heard just didn't have the power to be able to abuse Johnny Depp. So she believes that the power dynamics there just really weren't beneficial for Depp's argument that he was abused by Amber. So, we'll see if people speak up after the verdict comes in.
Absolutely. And we only have like 10 seconds here. Did Jennifer Aniston say anything?
She, I wouldn't expect her to. She's an A-list star, obviously, but she very subtly showed her support by following Johnny Depp right after the trial started. So it may have been a little bit of a cosign, but I didn't expect her to actually make a statement.
Fascinating stuff. All right, so after the verdict, we're going to check back with you. Eileen Reslin, senior news reporter for Page 6. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
When we come back, folks, during her closing argument, Camille Vasquez for Johnny Depp made the argument to the jury that Amber Heard, when she was on the witness stand, did not shed a tear. So tonight, we're going to ask the question, did she cry? We'll take a look at the video, the still photographs, and bring in our experts. Don't go anywhere.
Jewelry with Worthy.com.
She came into this courtroom prepared to give the performance of her life, and she gave it. Ms. Heard's acting coach, Christina Sexton, testified that Ms. Heard has difficulty crying when she is acting. You saw it. Ms. Heard sobbing without tears, while spinning elaborate, exaggerated, fantastical accounts of abuse and everything going on in her mind almost a decade prior while enduring that abuse. It was a performance.
80–90% of our sessions began with her crying. And that would be increasing as it went on. Ironically, she has a little difficulty crying, acting-wise, so which a lot of us do. And so, yeah, we would have to work when we were doing it acting-wise.
How about that? Welcome back. We're live in Fairfax County, Virginia, outside the courthouse. Jury deliberating today for more than 7 hours. They've been out more than 9 hours. In just over 12 hours, they'll be back at work behind me. But how about that? Testimony from her acting coach. Difficulty crying. Always a big issue in any case. When someone cries on the witness stand, people will question, is it real? Is it crocodile tears? Were there any real tears? Well, that's what we want to ask tonight about Amber Heard. So let's take another look now at her testifying about that horrific alleged sexual assault in Australia.
The next thing I remember, I was bent over backwards on the bar, meaning my chest was up. I was staring at the blue lights and my chest was on this, my back was on the countertops, and I thought he was punching me. I felt this pressure. He on my pubic bone, and he thought he was punching me. And I remember that he's just not wanting to move, because I didn't know if it was broken. I didn't know if the bottle that he had inside me was broken.
That's some of the video testimony. I want to show you some still images from inside the courtrooms. And let's begin with day one of her testimony. Take a close look. What do you see in that image? I don't necessarily myself see a tear in this one. Let's go to the next one from day one. And this is one that I think a lot of people have talked about. I've seen some people point it out on social media. You look on the left side of her cheek, screen right. Looks like there might be a droplet there. It looks like there might be one. I've seen it pointed out. People have seen that one. Let's take a look at some still images from day two of her testimony now. This was the video you just saw from this day, which was a little more emotional, I think. One more image I have for you here. She's wiping, and the question, is she wiping a tear? What exactly is she wiping? It's a big issue because, trust me, the jury could be debating the same thing. They've got to figure out who's telling the truth, who's not telling the truth. Real tears or not real tears? Let's bring in our guest joining us in River Edge, New Jersey, family law attorney Janelle Weinstein. She has seen some tears inside the courtroom. Janine Driver, body language expert, joining us here in Virginia, former ATF investigator, and of course, New York Times bestselling author of You Can't Lie to Me. And Dr. Judy Ho, clinical forensic neuropsychologist, associate professor at Pepperdine University, and she's out there where the weather's always nice in Los Angeles, California. Okay, Janine Driver, I'll begin with you. Do you know from all your years of experience how we act and react when we are legitimately crying?
I do. Well, first of all, when we cry, when it's pure sadness, there's a decrease in our muscle tone and we hunch over. We don't get straight up and we don't wipe our tears with our chin up. We tend to look away or look down when we're crying. And people, I think, oversimplify sadness. The inner eyebrows are pulled together and up. But when we fake sadness, it's sulking. The brows come down and our mouth comes down. It's like our kids crying. And there's 11 levels of sadness, everything from disappointment to discouragement, distraught, resignation, helplessness, hopelessness, misery, despair, grief, sorrow, and ultimately anguish. Nowhere in here is sulking. No one is home alone, crying and sulking alone. But we cry for hours on end in private. This is fake sadness. And it's really, her acting coach, I wrote her name down, Christina Sexton. She must be a really good acting coach because she hit the nail on the head. He's not good at fake crying.
Dr. Judy Ho, did you see tears? Did you see crying? I mean, you must have seen clients in the office crying. They're spilling their guts to you, Dr. Judy Ho.
Right, and I did see some tears in some of the stills that you were showing just now, but I think it really just depends on the person, right? I think that everybody expresses their sadness in different ways. Also, some emotions are mixed. It's not just sadness. There's also shame in there. There's a mix of emotions. And really, everybody does express their sadness in very different ways. I've had patients who don't shed a tear at all. I still believe that they have genuine emotion, but it's like they just don't cry at all, even when they're talking about the most traumatic things that have ever happened to them. And then I have patients who cry really because they got a parking ticket and that was so upsetting to them that they're crying in my office about that, right? So everybody really does have a very different way of expressing varying levels of emotion depending on various stressors. And this is a person that has had multiple different things happen to her. Forget about what's going on with Johnny. I mean, she's talking about other things in her life. There's other stressors, right? And we always look for that. It's like, are there other things that might explain why she's sad? Is it all Johnny or is there something else going on too?
You know, every trial, Janelle, it's always an issue when someone cries. I mean, everyone evaluates, are they real, are they not real? But this is a whole nother level where you have professional actors inside the courtroom. Let's take, as we listen to and watch Amber Heard here, Janelle, tell me if you see any tears, because here she is talking about that she loved Johnny Depp at some point, but Depp had this other horrible side. So as we watch it here, how do you think the jury's taking this, Janelle, this part?
You know, Vinny, I don't know, based on the context of what she's talking about, I don't think they're going to see any tears, but she's also, you know, frustrated and angry. And again, we have to keep in mind, this isn't the first time that she's telling this story. So I think there's a component when you have somebody talk about, take depositions and testify in other cases, that it really takes a toll on some of these clients, these witnesses. And I don't see any tears, but she's also very frustrated as well.
Take over, and it was...
Yeah, that's a great point. You see a little bit of... how can you tell the difference, Janine, between someone who is kind of angry, frustrated, versus someone who is distraught?
You know, and I wanted to ask the doctor this, that her patients that were sad and authentically sad, but weren't crying, were they making these sound effects? Were they going, This is the difference between sadness. Sadness is a slow roll, and sometimes people won't cry. The inner eyebrows are scientifically proven to go in and up, and the mouth curves down. I like to say when the brows are together and up, sadness fills our cup. But when the brows are down, sulking is in town. And so it's not so much about the tears, it's about the facial expression. Dr. Paul Ekman proved there's 7 universal emotions, and one of those is sadness. It doesn't matter if you're a man, a woman, black, white, Hispanic, Buddhist, Jewish, atheist. It doesn't matter where you are in the world. This is what sadness looks like. And you can see it on Johnny Depp's face in the courtroom. You can see it with his painter friend, Isaac. You see that slow roll of sadness that comes in. It's not so much about the tears. It's about what's happening in the face in those moments.
Hey, Dr. Judy Ho, go ahead. Janine asked a really good question about the people who no tears but are sad and crying. What do you see?
Well, some of my patients don't cry, and they've been taught not to cry sometimes. And sometimes it's due to cultural backgrounds and values and what they've been taught when they were younger. So really, I think that there is a wide range here. I do think that there's more than sadness that Amber might be displaying. And to my earlier point, I think part of all of this is, of course, other stresses in her life, including the stress of this trial, this very public trial, where she's been essentially over-scrutinized for about 2 months now. And before that, there were depositions, there were all of these procedures. So I think some of her anger, frustration, it may not be sadness now, it could be all of these other emotions is all being bottled up. And then, of course, the complicating factor is we're watching an actress. So everyone's thinking, okay, is this somebody who's just acting, right? Which is what Janine was talking about. Is this somebody with genuine sadness versus this is really just somebody going through life and she's had a rough deal, whatever that rough deal is, whether it has to do with Johnny or not. That is what she's expressing. And I think that the jury really is out, and certainly the court of public opinion is out on what she's actually displaying here.
All right, our guests are going to stay with us. When we come back, we're going to talk about the divorce. Whose idea was it? Who wanted to get divorced? Was it Johnny or Amber? I think it depends upon who you're listening to at the moment. That's next.
Nix.com.
I'll never be able to understand how I fell in love with you. You're not her. I loved you more than anything. I did everything that I could, but you never loved me. I was merely convenient for you. I hope our divorce goes as quickly as possible and that it is as painless as possible. So sorry you were as unhappy with me as you were. Obviously, the purity of whatever was has been gone for a long time. I will miss the moments of beauty and truth. Goodbye, Amber. What the was I thinking? I wish you all you merit. The former him.
How about that? That's like the farewell text when, you know, this marriage is over, from Johnny Depp to Amber Heard, read inside the courtroom. But whose idea was it for this divorce? Let's take another listen to the testimony of Johnny Depp and Amber Heard. Listen closely and try to figure out, like, whose idea was it? And how important will that be for this jury to figure out what was going on between these two and what each of them wanted? Let's take a listen.
And I decided that I would call Amber and tell her that my mom had died that day. And then I very calmly said, look, I've made a decision and I think it's the best thing. I'm going to file for divorce. But I'm not going to. I'm not going to cite irreconcilable differences. I'm not going to cite any violence. I'm not going to. I'm going to state this. We simply, the two of us, we simply don't want to feel as though we have a collar around each other's neck and a leash attached to it, and then this piece of paper that proves that that's true. So what I thought was best was we want to end this in love and take the idea of ownership of one another out of the picture. And that's how I approached Miss Heard with that.
Why did you file for divorce?
Because I knew if I didn't, I'd likely not literally survive. I'm so scared that it was going to end really badly for me. And I really didn't want to leave him. I loved him so much. I would have done anything, but I couldn't do that one thing. I couldn't stay. The promise and the hope that I had become less and less regular and more rare. The monster had been this thing that was now the normal and not the exception. The violence was now normal and not the exception. And it was so hard. It was so hard, but I knew I had to do it.
They don't agree on anything. They don't even agree on whose idea it was to get the divorce. I mean, Johnny Depp telling us a story where she's telling him, and she's like, no, it was me. Well, she filed for the divorce, but was it his idea? Was it her idea? What does it tell us? What does it reveal? Let's bring back in our guest, Janelle Weinstein, family law attorney. Is it always clear in these breakups about who wants the divorce and who wants the divorce first? Does that reveal anything about the nature of the relationship?
No, not necessarily. I mean, the interesting part here is she filed after her temporary restraining order, which typically can be very common with victims of domestic violence, that there's one thing that finally happens, that they're ready to pull off the Band-Aid and file for divorce because they can't take it anymore. And that's how Amber came across if you took her at face value. On the other hand, Johnny is talking about their love and that we have to end this in, you know, kind of a poetic way, which is kind of odd to me as well, because he's crying that he's a victim of domestic violence as well, and that she's made all these things up about him. And why would he want to pose it to her that way if he was already, I believe he was already apart from her. So again, it's so confusing for a jury. I mean, I have the experience to see how these people come to pass and looking at the differences over my 30 years of practice, but these juries have no familiarity and they may have their own experiences, but they're also mostly young. So it's going to be interesting how this impacts them. Again, I think it's going to go to credibility, and that's the story they're going to believe at the end of the day.
Yeah, and right now, Janelle, everyone at home is saying, what, she started practicing law when she was 10? There you go.
Exactly.
How about that? That was good, right, Janelle? All right.
I definitely
Dr. Judy Ho, let me ask you. Yeah. Dr. Judy Ho, let me ask you, what are your thoughts about whose idea the divorce was, and is it important to truly understand who's the victim and who's the aggressor in this relationship?
Well, I agree with Janelle that it really depends on the couple and it doesn't necessarily matter. But what I see throughout this trial and even with this topic is this. Johnny looks like the person who has the calm and steady hand, at least in the public eye. Of course, they have these recordings of each other where Johnny was extremely emotional, right? That Amber tapes surreptitiously. But when you look at Johnny in court, it appears that he is over it. He's not emotional. He's talking about it in this poetic way, but it seems so far away to him. Meanwhile, you look at Amber's demeanor throughout this entire trial. It looks like she's still living in that moment. She's still extremely emotional. It's like it's still happening to her right now, even when she was talking about their past love. So I think this is going to be up to the jury and, of course, the public opinion to decide. Is she super emotional because she truly suffered some trauma, and this is why she is acting the way that she has throughout this entire trial? Or is she just a very emotional person, and that actually speaks to maybe something that would be detrimental to her public persona, that maybe that emotionality shows that she could have also be abusing Johnny in their relationship. I know we've talked about this term mutual abuse. Did that really happen? Psychologists tend to believe that that's a more rare form of abuse. There's usually one person that's the main perpetrator, but I think that the way that Amber has displayed herself is that she is truly the emotional one still living in this moment today.
Okay, Janine Driver, everyone's on the edge of their seats. What did you see in their explanations about who wanted the divorce?
I did a TED Talk on this called How 5 Words Can Get You What You Want. And one of the words Johnny said here is, I decided. Decided does not mean he executed on that. When I was with ATF, if I was interviewing you and I said, you know, what's your relationship like with your spouse? And you said, well, we decided to get divorced 2 years ago. If the cop wrote, got divorced 2 years ago, decided doesn't mean they've executed on it. It's a wiggle word. It's actually in the 3 stages of decision making: research, reasoning, and the result. The decision is made here, the result is where it's executed on. So when Johnny said, I decided I would tell Amber, I would then ask, well, did you actually execute on that? I decided I would tell Amber, I would be very calm, and I said. Now he does get into past tense here. I said, I made the decision. Did he in fact do it? Decided does not mean, if someone said we decided not to give you a raise, Vinnie, that doesn't mean you can't get a raise. You just got to do a little more fighting for it. You just have to say, well, who'd you give the raise to? Has it been executed on? Decided does not mean it's been executed on. Amber says, if I didn't, I was so scared. But then she says the monster and the violence. This is distancing language, right? We heard this with Bill Clinton. I did not have sexual relations with that woman right here. So this distancing language, could it be because, in fact, she's a battered woman? Or could it be because it never happened, she creates the distancing language? So we've got, 6 of these and half a dozen of this.
Gotcha. And by the way, when I do go for that raise, going to wear a hidden camera, earpiece, connected up to Janine Driver, and she's going to be coaching me through my negotiations so I can tell if there's more money to be had.
Watch
Great
my
job
TED
tonight,
Talk.
Giselle Weinstein. Janine Driver, Dr. Judy Ho, thank you so much. We shall speak again. When we come back, speaking of TikTok, a lot of allegations on TikTok. We're going to take a look at some of those allegations. Chanley Painter will join me, and she'll tell you the truth about what's being alleged in those videos.
And save 15%.
My dog stepped on a bee.
My dad has to pee.
My mom's stuck in a tree.
My squirrel got bit by a flea.
My cat knocked over my tea.
I'm an emoji.
Amber Heard dropped a grumpy.
TikTok at it again. That was one of the big viral moments from the testimony about Amber Heard, her dog stepping on the bee. That relates to, put a little context in that testimony, that came from the trip to Hicksville, where on the same day, she says Johnny Depp gave her an unwanted cavity search. I don't think you ever want one, but it was like, it's a sexual assault is what it was. And that's what she alleged on the same day that she testified about the dog stepping on the bee. What I want to do is bring back in Court TV legal correspondent Chanley Painter, because there are some other videos on TikTok which make allegations and talk about things that they believe may be happening, that they're seeing in the video. So I want to put some context and truth to what we know about what we're seeing in the video. So let's start first with the deputy and Amber's water bottle. Let's watch that one first. Okay, so the allegation there is that she's got the water bottle. What's in the bottle, right? That she drops it and the deputy picks up her water bottle. What's really going on off screen there? Do we know?
We do know. We have confirmed what actually happened. That's Master Deputy Eric Halusa in the video. He's the one that's really running the courtroom, the jury, keeping the gallery in order, a familiar face to anyone who's sat inside the courtroom during this trial. So what we see is we see him there. He walks behind Amber. And of course, she throws away a water bottle, exits. And then our shot, he goes down there, but our shot goes to the, of course, seal.
Because court's over.
Right. So, but what has happened is he picks up the knife, one of the exhibits that he walked in front of the jury earlier in the day, the knife that Amber Heard gave to Johnny Depp that says "Until Death" on it. So he was just picking up the piece of evidence, not the water bottle.
The piece of evidence that was left, and right there you can see it kind of goes in that area, and that's where it's left, the actual piece of evidence. Okay, so they did not pick up the water bottle. We can confirm that. Another video I want you to take a look at, and this one involves one of our cameras inside the courtroom. It's like a baby monitor nanny cam. Let's take a look at the TikTok first.
One thing I did notice is that there was a camera, like a baby cam or a nanny cam, pointed at Amber on Amber's side. So I went back and I looked at the other day, on Thursday, it was there as well, but it wasn't the day before. Let me show you. So right here, you can see it right here, right there. There's that white nanny cam. And then this is Thursday. Let's see, right, where's my finger? Right here. You can see it right there. That was Thursday. But if you look here, see, where the heck is my finger? Right here, this is Wednesday, and nothing. There was no nanny cam on Wednesday. So what changed? I find it super strange that today it was very obvious sitting there. Why?
Why? Let's answer it. So
Sure.
What's the camera used for? Who's it pointed out, and where did it go?
Okay, so our crew, not inside the courtroom, but a room outside the courtroom that runs all the cameras. We have an operator that runs camera, runs the switch feed, maintains the audio in the courtroom. They use the nanny camera to watch the judge. So they see the judge when she enters the courtroom and exits the courtroom. It's kind of their eye on the courtroom. And they moved it, Vinny, so it wouldn't be in the shot.
So we moved it so you wouldn't see it.
Yeah.
So we did that, Court TV, on purpose, because it was in the shot. It was kind of like awkward seeing this white thing. So it's still over there. It's just in a place where you won't see it on camera. Right. Makes sense to me. All right, I don't want to run out of time on this one. Final one, Ben Chew and the gummy bears. Take a look. Okay, is Ben Chew eating Johnny Depp's candy?
Correction, those are Ben Chew's gummy bears. He brings them to court every day for himself. He lets Johnny Depp have some of his gummy bears. He has a big sweet tooth.
So it's the other way around. You see? Shanley bringing us the truth. Okay. All right, that's it, folks. That should go viral. The truth should actually go viral. Shanley Painter, thank you so much. We got more to come, folks. When we come back, we'll bring in our think tank and take a look at what the jury has to answer. In Fairfax County, Virginia, Johnny Depp versus Amber Heard. Everyone waiting to hear from the jury, who sends out a note.
The question is, does question number 3, the statement is false, pertain to the headline, I spoke up against sexual violence and faced our culture's wrath, or does it pertain to the content of the statement, everything written in the op-ed?
Tonight, we take you through all the questions this jury must answer as they continue to deliberate. Who is telling the truth? Johnny Depp?
Have never in my life committed sexual battery, physical abuse, all these outlandish, outrageous stories.
Or Amber Heard?
I am harassed, humiliated, threatened every single day. Even just walking into this courtroom, sitting here in front of the world, having the worst parts of my life, things I've lived through, used to humiliate me. People want to kill me.
Plus, tonight's 13th juror question, what was the biggest lie told to this jury? Buckle your seatbelts. We are live from Virginia as Verdict Watch continues in Johnny Depp versus Amber Heard. I'm Vinnie Politan. Thank you so much for joining us tonight here on Closing Arguments, live from Fairfax County, Virginia, where today behind me inside that courthouse, the jury deliberated all day, left a little bit early, said we want out of here without reaching a verdict. They've deliberated a total of just over 9 hours over the course of 2 days, a little bit on Friday, but a lot more Tuesday here in Virginia. In the meantime, we did hear from the jury once today. They had a question, a single question that came out around the middle of the day. Let's take a listen.
It's basically in regards to number C, items 1 and 3, and number C is a jury instruction on the finding instruction for the online article title. The question is, does question number 3, the statement is false, pertain to the headline, I spoke up against sexual violence and faced our culture's wrath, or does it pertain to the content of the statement, everything written in the op-ed? So I think the confusion came in this particular one because the statement in question is the title of the op-ed. So I think they're just confused as whether it's the whole op-ed or just the title is the statement. And it's clear that the title is the statement. So I was going to answer to say the title is the statement in question for number 3. Does that seem appropriate to everybody?
Which they've phrased as headline as opposed to title. But
right, because the headline is the alleged defamatory statement. So I can say the statement is the headline, and not the entire op-ed. Is that what you want me to say? All right. Thank you. The statement is the headline, not the entire op-ed. All right. I will send that back to them.
I'm sorry, but that note tells me nothing about what the jury thinks about Johnny Depp or Amber Heard or their stories. What it does tell me, though, is that the time they sent this note out, they were kind of in the beginning stages of trying to answer the questions they need to answer. They're all in this special verdict form, and I've got a copy of it for you. And what we're going to do this hour is go through the same exact form, go through the same exact questions that the jury has to answer, so you understand exactly why it has taken 9 hours with no verdict already. Okay, so let me bring in my think tank tonight who's going to help work our way through this special verdict form. Joining us tonight in Atlanta, Georgia, Michael Sterling. He's a criminal defense attorney, former federal prosecutor. He's also a law professor at Texas Southern University. Also with us tonight in Seattle, Washington, trial attorney Ann Bremner, who has been with me at all the big cases. I thought I thought she might be here tonight, but no, she's in Washington. Also with us tonight in West Palm Beach, Florida, former police lieutenant, great trial attorney, Rick King as well. Welcome to you all. I want to get to this verdict form, and I want to walk through it with all of you tonight. And I want to begin with the first one, which is the one which came up in the question because the statement is the same as the title of the article. And the questions that this jury has to answer as to this statement appearing in the op-ed entitled Amber Heard, I spoke up against sexual violence and faced our culture's wrath. That has to change. In the Washington Post online edition, the actual statement was, quote, this is the alleged defamatory statement. I spoke up against sexual violence and faced our culture's wrath. That has to change. So here are the questions that have to be answered by this jury as it pertains to that statement. Let's bring back in our think tank as we do this. The statement was made or published by Ms. Heard. Is that an easy question, Michael Sterling? Because that's the headline. This is the one statement that they're saying we had nothing to do with. The Washington Post just put that on the article.
And that's why I think it's not an easy question to answer. The argument from Depp's team was that despite the fact that there was the editor of the Post who actually created and put the headline forward, not Ms. Heard, the response from Depp's team was that, well, she retweeted it without any edits or exceptions and essentially endorsing the statement. And then obviously the content of the article is what they believe references Johnny Depp. So the question becomes, the jury seems to be saying, okay, do you take this statement and then look at the content and say, was she referring to Johnny Depp when we get down to these other elements? Or you just look at the statement itself, and then we've got to answer this question, was this made by Amber Heard? And I think that's a tougher question. Particularly because it says the one that was published in the Washington Post, not the one that was tweeted by her. So, you know, I think that's probably a tough question for the jury to wrangle with, is whether or not she actually made that statement.
Yeah, which in most defamation cases, that's like the easiest question to answer, right? Someone says something, you sue them. But did she actually say this? Let me ask you this. Another question this jury has to answer, Ann. The statement was about Mr. Depp. I spoke up against sexual violence and faced our culture's wrath. That has to change. Is that statement about Mr. Depp?
Well, that's why we call it defamation by implication. You know, Vinnie, I think that's what.
Where's the implication? Sexual. Is the implication though? But she's saying I spoke up against sexual violence. She's not saying I'm a victim. So is it about Mr. Depp that she spoke up?
Oh, that's a great point. I mean, the jury could well find that it's not about him. I mean, like she said on the stand, he thinks it's about him. You know, he thinks everything's about him. But the fact is, it wasn't. She could speak out against sexual violence. She happens to be an activist. She's somebody that's done a lot of, you know, kind of public work, an ambassador now for the ACLU, et cetera, and L'Oreal, I guess. But they could find that it's not Johnny Depp. But I think anybody in their right mind knows that's what she's talking about. That's who she was married to, and she'd been pretty public about claims of abuse, you know, in the past, including the leaked, you know, information to TMZ and the bruise on the face and everything else. So, you know, you put two and two together, and you know it's Johnny Depp. Who else would it be?
Okay, I think there's a better argument for that one. The next question, Rick King. The statement was false. Again, the statement is, I spoke up against sexual violence and faced our culture's wrath. That has to change. Is that true? Did she speak up against sexual violence and face our culture's wrath?
That's absolutely true. And here's the thing that really baffles me at this point. So with all deference to my colleagues, including you, Vinnie, on the dais here, you know, I probably have the least amount of civil trial experience than any of you. But that being said, when I look at these instructions, or look at this verdict form, and I read it, I feel like this is a lot for a layperson to come into and read and try to make a determination. When they asked that question, in my mind, I said to myself, Well, yeah, she's facing the wrath right now. Look at the TikToks that you showed earlier, of the billions of people that are against her in terms of this. And that's what I feel like the jury's thinking. I don't know that they're really contemplating what the article did during that time. They're taking it, as I took it initially, was, I'm talking, this is all encompassing. Is this happening right now? Is this the question that I'm answering, what's happening to her? And I feel like on some level, even when she wrote it, you have to answer, yeah, she is. And this is the prime example of it.
And that would make, if it's true, then all of a sudden, guess what? That goes away. Let's move on to the second one, because there are actually 3 alleged defamatory statements. The next one is, then 2 years ago, I became a public figure representing domestic abuse, and I felt the full force of our culture's wrath for women who speak out. Okay, is that statement about Mr. Depp? Is that statement about Mr. Depp, Rick?
2 years,
2 years ago.
Like when this trial was started, she was married to him. I feel like it has to be.
Has to be. That's an easy one. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's get rid of the easy ones. The statement was false. Michael Sterling, is that statement false? 2 years ago, she became a public figure representing domestic abuse and felt the full force of our culture's wrath for women who speak out.
Yeah, I think this is really the crux of the case, right? This is really where we get into the real issues the jury has to decide, and what all of the back and forth has been about is whether or not she actually suffered abuse at the hands of Johnny Depp, whether or not she was a public figure representing domestic abuse because she suffered it. So I think that's really where we get, Vinny, I think, to the heart of the case.
So, wait, Michael, let me interrupt you for 1 second. I want to break this down because I think you're onto something here. You're always onto something. Super smart. I became a public figure representing domestic abuse. Is it just about becoming a public figure, or does she have to suffer the abuse? Like, even if she didn't suffer abuse but becomes a public figure, does she somehow argue, or does the jury think this could potentially be true? Or is this the statement where this jury's got to be convinced that she's an actual victim?
I believe, based on all of the presentation, that the jury has to believe she actually suffered the abuse, that the jury's got to believe it, that they've got to believe that she was, in fact, a victim of the abuse, which is how she describes in the article she became a public figure representing domestic abuse. And I think that's really the heart of the case, is whether or not the jurors believe that Johnny Depp abused her in some way. And I thought that, we can go to those closing arguments where they said, well, you can have psychological abuse, you can have physical abuse, and she doesn't talk about what specific type of abuse, but you can read some of these text messages and say that, and see that she was suffering some psychological abuse from the things he said and the way he approached her. So I think that, it doesn't necessarily have to be physical abuse, but she's saying that she represented domestic abuse, and there are many ways to be a victim of abuse. And then obviously that is completely contradicted by Johnny Depp's team saying that, no, I was actually the victim of abuse, not her.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, as you break it down statement by statement and separate them, it becomes more difficult to prove. I think it becomes much more difficult to prove. The other things they have to prove is that the statement had a defamatory implication about Mr. Depp, and the defamatory implication was designed and intended by Ms. Heard. So how about that, Ann Bremner? The defamatory implication was designed and intended by Ms. Heard. Do you think the statement was made to hurt Johnny Depp, or was it just to give her some PR before Aquaman came out? And if so, is that a defense for her here?
Well, absolutely. I still want to hear your argument that was better than mine earlier, Vinny, on the issue of whether it pertained to Depp. But I think that, she didn't, all of these are really hard to prove. So you go out and have a platform and you become a spokesperson for people that have been abused. How does that defame Johnny Depp? And she basically wanted a platform. We heard about that for Aquaman. and the ACLU helped her write it. In fact, it sounds like they wrote it. So I think these jurors.
Oh, they wrote the whole thing. They wrote the whole thing.
Yeah, yeah. So basically, how this jury's going to get through here and find for Johnny Depp is going to be very difficult.
Let's get to the last statement. The last statement that is alleged here is, I had the rare vantage point of seeing in real time how institutions protect men accused of abuse. Okay. Was this made or published by Ms. Heard is one of the questions. I think we can answer yes to that. The statement was about Mr. Depp. I think that's an easy yes. The statement was false. Huh. Is that statement false, Rick King? I had the rare vantage point of seeing in real time how institutions protect men accused of abuse.
How can that be false? And then I think actually, Vinny, you stumbled onto what I think is the best defense in this case that I've heard to date, which is I was propped up to be the spokesperson for domestic violence. And as a result, these things that I'm saying, these things that I saw, these things that I witnessed, these things that I say that that had the vantage point to see, it's because of my interactions with domestic violence organizations and victims and things of that nature. And none of this is about Johnny Depp. This is about the place that I was put in as a result of my desire to be in a better place of celebrity. So I took a position to be the spokesperson for this cause, and that's what I'm talking about. So I think that you probably stumbled on.
No, I agree. I think this is something that makes this case much more difficult. When you dive into this verdict form, you see how difficult each and everything that they have to prove ends up being. And they don't have to prove it beyond a reasonable doubt, but just to prove it is a challenge here. Let me get to one other part. If, in fact, they do find one or more of those statements to be defamatory, there's the issue of damages. Compensatory and punitive. The punitive is capped here in Virginia because of tort reform. So it's really about the compensatory amount. Who wants to put a price tag on it? Ann Bremner, what do you think if they do fine for Johnny Depp? What do you think is a reasonable number in all of this? Because it wasn't like he was asking for money at the end. He was almost saying this wasn't about money.
Right, which is why they may just do something that's nominal. I mean, they could do $1, as long as he's got the finding and the period at the end of all these sentences saying that you were defamed, you were defamed, you were defamed, and this was done with malice. They may do something in between $0, $1, and $50 million. But if he says it's not about the money, they'll probably take him at his word.
Yeah. Michael, let me ask you about a compromise here. Let's say this jury doesn't agree. Let's say they left early today because they're just not getting along and they don't see everything the same way. Is one way to compromise in a civil case to say, okay, give us the liability and we'll award no damages? Is that a possibility of these jurors, you know, if it's 5-2 or 6-1, whatever it is, saying, listen, just give us the liability, but then, yeah, we won't give them any money?
Yeah, jurors do all sorts of interesting things, Vinny, in that verdict room. I wish that we could have a camera in there. Jurors do all sorts of really, really interesting things in verdict room. But yeah, I would not put that beyond the possibility that if the jurors are somehow deadlocked, that jurors start to come up with creative ways to satisfy the interest of different members in the jury room and say, especially the foreperson, their job is kind of to lead the discussion. And so they start to figure out, can we figure out a way to compromise? You think, you know, most of us think that, you know, there's liability here, but we don't think that, you know, he needs $50 million. A juror could certainly say, you know, would you compromise with us and say, you know, there's liability, but we won't award $50 million. We'll do something nominal that just sends the message that we thought these statements were defamatory, and to make sure that something like this doesn't happen in the future. There could be another compromise. They could say, well, why don't we find liability for both of them, that he defamed her and her lawyer defamed him. I mean, her lawyer defamed her, his lawyer defamed her, and he defamed. They do all sorts of things, Vinny, and figure out ways to compromise if they can come to it. But jurors are unpredictable. They're interesting creatures.
They are not, and there's so much leeway here because there are cross claims. When we come back, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to go through the second half of this special verdict form, which are the claims made by Amber Heard against Johnny Depp. What does she have to prove? Don't go anywhere.
I just wanted him to leave me alone. I wanted to move on with my life. And he won't let me. By making statements like this, he won't let me. I have to be here today. I have to be reliving it every single time. He, with these statements, with these leaks, these comments, once again, makes me have to speak to the most horrifying things I've lived through.
Yours at Nix.com.
It says, Adam Waldman, Depp's lawyer, said afterwards, quote, Amber Heard and her friends in the media used fake sexual violence allegations as both a sword and a shield, depending on their needs. They have selected some of her sexual violence hoax facts, quote facts, end of quote, as the sword, inflicting them on the public and Mr. Depp. Do you see that?
I do.
Did you make that statement?
I believe I did.
That is one of the allegedly defamatory statements that Amber Heard is suing Johnny Depp over. That guy was his lawyer, still is his lawyer. He was a lawyer in this case, but is now out of the case because of these conflicts that exist. But the question is, can Johnny Depp be held responsible for that? We're diving into the special verdict form to try to figure out and take a look at the questions that the jury has to answer that they haven't answered yet after 9 hours of deliberations today. Again, that statement is, take a look, Amber Heard and her friends in the media use fake sexual violence allegations as both a sword and shield, depending on their need. They have selected some of her sexual violence hoax facts as the sword, inflicting them on the public and Mr. Depp. Michael Sterling, Ann Bremner, Rick King still with me. Okay, here's the question the jury has to answer about that statement, Ann Bremner. Mr. Waldman, while acting as an agent for Mr. Depp, made or published the statement. He admitted making the statement, but was he acting as an agent for Mr. Depp?
Well, you know, the French word for advocate is avocat, which means you're standing in the shoes of your client. So the answer's yes, and I think there was enough circumstantial evidence there to support that, but that's going to be up to the jury to decide. It's a question of fact. You know, then the next question is, of course, whether this is defamatory. I thought that Ben...
Well, we're going to get there. We're going to get there.
Okay.
We're going to get there.
Okay.
We're going to get there.
All right.
The next question. Okay. The statement was about Ms. Heard. That's an obvious one. I will answer that. That is yes. Okay. The statement was seen by someone other than Mr. Heard or Ms. Heard. The answer to that is yes. The statement was false. Ah, Rick King.
Yeah.
That's the key. Is this statement false? Was it a hoax? These allegations of fake sexual violence allegations.
That's in the purview of the trier of fact. And I guess we're all here as we sit right now in the shoes of the trier of fact. We have to make a determination from where we're sitting. From where I'm sitting, I don't believe all the allegations that she made. So that's something that the jury's going to come up with. But at the end of the day, that's his lawyer. And while he might be the agent of Johnny Depp, those comments that he makes are in the vein of advocacy. And I think that's different. That's different. I don't think that falls the same way.
Yeah, I mean, lawyers' words are protected inside the courtroom, but I guess apparently not outside of the courtroom. So the statement was false. It all comes down to these fake sexual violence allegations. It's the ultimate issue here on the credibility of Amber Heard. Michael Sterling, is this a strong claim for Amber Heard?
Well, Vinnie, I think the other thing that we've got to remember and that our audience has to remember is that not only does the jury have these 8 pages of questions to answer, they also have probably over 100 pages of jury instructions that are defining some of the words we're looking at. For example, the word agent, what did it mean for him to be acting as an agent, which has a specific legal definition, and I'm sure the lawyers argued vigorously back and forth on what definition agent would be used in the jury instructions. And so the question becomes, you know, while we typically think of what an agent is or what it means, the question is, what was the jury instructed as to, in this particular defamation case, meant an agent? Did it mean that he was acting as if he was Mr. Depp himself making the statement? So the question becomes, what does it mean to be an agent? And I think that there are, under the law and specifically under the jury instructions that were provided to this jury. So I think the question becomes, I think those become the real two questions in that sequence, right? What does it mean to be acting as an agent, and did he satisfy that? And also, does the jury believe that some of the facts that she pulled were selectively used, and some of them were in fact untrue, and that they were a hoax, and that his classification of them as a hoax was substantially true to the point where Amber Heard cannot succeed on defamation? So I think that's really the question the jurors are looking at. And I think, from our perspective, we've seen her, certainly in some aspects get caught in telling some things that weren't true. And whether or not the jury believes that everything she said was true, or whether or not she did selectively use some of these things as a sword and a shield against Mr. Depp, I think there's some credibility issues and some factual basis to believe that she did, and that what he said was substantially true and not in fact false.
Next statement. This is the next alleged defamatory statement, and take a close listen. Quite simply, this was an ambush, a hoax. They set Mr. Depp up by calling the cops, but the first attempt didn't do the trick. The officers came to the penthouses, thoroughly searched and interviewed, and left after seeing no damage to face or property. So Amber and her friends spilled a little wine, roughed the place up, got their stories straight under the direction of a lawyer and publicist, and then placed a second call to 911. Is that statement false? The statement, again, made by the lawyer.
Yeah, it's one that's a dicey one. Obviously he used some poetic license.
There's a lot in it.
I know there's a lot in it too. So some's true, some's false, but a lot of it's not gonna.
Okay. Ann, let me stop you right there. Ann, so what does the jury do if they believe part of it's true and part of it's false? Because there's a lot of different things here. So does that make the statement false if it's just partially false?
My answer would be no. Basically, you can only find it false if it's false. That was quite the paragraph. That's what they put in their jury instructions. That's what they put out as a defamatory statement. Obviously he's demeaning them and saying it's a hoax, and they cleaned it up, and they did, she and her pals, were doing all these untoward things. So the tone is very bad, but the content could be true and false.
Unbelievable. Let's take a look at the last one. We have reached the beginning of the end of Miss Heard's abuse hoax against Johnny Depp. So this gets to the big picture, Rick King. Was this an abuse hoax or not? So the statement was made by Waldman. He's admitted that. The statement is about Miss Heard. The statement was seen by someone other than Miss Heard. And the final question here will be, was the statement false? Was this a hoax or not? So let me ask you this. Is an exaggeration a hoax? Say something happens, but what you say publicly is much greater than what actually happened. Is that a hoax?
If what you say is not what it is, that's the definition of a hoax. It's not what it is. You've made up something and you've tried to make it more than it was. That's the absolute definition. Now, again, let me just temper that by saying that's a position the jury, they're going to have to fight over that a little bit, because whether it's a credibility question. Do you believe Amber Heard? Do you believe everything that she's saying? Do you believe that all these things happen? I have to, for me, it's either all true or it's not true. I don't know if you can take a statement put out by one of these questions and say half of it's true, half of it's not. So I'm going to say that it's true. I think it's either all true or it's all false. It can't be halfway.
You know what's fascinating? I've just thought about it. There's so many different possibilities of what the ultimate verdict will be here. Johnny could win, Amber could win. But there is a way where this jury could believe that Johnny Depp did engage in some abuse he loses. She exaggerated everything, and she loses also. That's another way for this thing to be a tie. Unbelievable, unbelievable. This is not an easy job for this jury of 7. Okay, folks, think tank, stand with us. When we come back, we're going to show you more of what happened inside the courtroom, and we're going to take you on the docket. Another super high-profile case about to begin. We'll have a report from Matt Johnson. Don't go anywhere. Somehow.
You know, the home isn't the problem. You know, if you're living in domestic violence, you don't just not go home. You know, you don't just not go into the kitchen just because you were slapped in that kitchen. People living in domestic violence live in their homes. That's almost, you know, the home isn't the problem. That's the normal part of your home. And for me, you know, Johnny was my home. Where we were a couple was my home. And that home was often really violent. But it wasn't the structure itself. It was Johnny.
Welcome back. We're outside the courthouse where today the jury did not reach a verdict. They deliberated for about 7 hours today, 9 hours total. They'll be back tomorrow morning, first thing 9 a.m. And when they come back, remember, a verdict can happen at any moment. They could have reached a verdict today and said, let's sleep on it and deliver it first thing in the morning. So make sure you're watching. Want to tell you about another trial that we're tracking on Court TV. It's a big case. It's a tough case, a really tough case. The Parkland school shooting. This case is going to be just a penalty phase because the Parkland school shooter has already pleaded guilty. Take a listen to the statement that he made after that guilty plea.
I am very sorry for what I did, and I have to live with it every day. And that if I were to get a second chance, I will do everything in my power to try to help others. And I am doing this for you, and I do not care if you do not believe me. And I love you, and I know you don't believe me, but I have to live with this every day. And it brings me nightmares, and I can't live with myself sometimes. But I try to push through because I know that's what you guys would want me to do. I hate drugs, and I believe this country would do better if everyone would stop smoking marijuana and doing all these drugs and causing racism and violence out in the streets. I'm sorry, and I can't even watch TV anymore. And I'm trying my best to maintain my composure, and I just want you to know I'm really sorry. And I hope you give me a chance to try to help others. If I believe it's your decision to decide where I go and whether I live or die. Not the jury's. I believe it's your decision. I'm sorry.
Strange, bizarre statement, but at the end of the day, he admitted to killing 17 people, shooting 17 others. So the trial is just about life or death for the Parkland school shooter. They started jury selection at the same time this trial started. But there have been a lot of twists and turns, so I want to bring in Court TV crime and justice reporter Matt Johnson, who, Matt, great to see you tonight.
Nice to see you.
I was expecting that trial to be going on the same time as this case. It hasn't worked out that way. What's going on with jury selection?
We were
Why
all
are they
thinking
not
that, right?
beginning that case yet?
Jury selection should have been done already. Delayed justice, according to victims' family members, Vinnie. Earlier today, we spoke with the father of Gina Montalto, one of the 14 students of the 17 people killed on Valentine's Day back in 2018.
The slow process, the delays and confusion at the beginning of the jury selection have been concerning to us. Again, we're looking forward to having this chapter of our lives behind us and have the adjudication process complete.
That process delayed first by the pandemic and then issues with evidence, then even more delays when the jury selection first began back in April.
And the testimony, that's going to start on May 31st, which is the Tuesday after Memorial Day, just to give you some point of reference. Then you will be required potentially to be back through the months of June, July, August, and September.
So that's right. Today should have been opening statements in all of this. Jury selection has taken almost 2 months and is expected to take another month before a jury of 12 plus 8 alternates are seated, a process that has been both time-consuming and chaotic at times. 1,900 people were questioned, and lawyers are now down to the final 300. Excuses included people saying that they didn't want to serve at all, they didn't have time, or they knew the suspect or victims. One woman said that she couldn't leave her sugar daddy alone. At the beginning of May, there was another delay after the lead defense attorney became sick. Recently, a judge ruled that the jurors will visit the crime scene that has been left intact, sealed off. That includes the book bags that were left there, the Valentine's Day cards. bullet holes on the walls in the building. Very powerful. The penalty phase is expected to last several months. The jury will have one decision to make. You talked about it, Vinnie. The death penalty or life in prison without the possibility of parole. But I can tell you this much. I'm worried about the family members, not too much about him watching TV and his nightmares.
Absolutely. It's torture. And while they're waiting to pick the jury, you have the shooting in Texas, which has to be such a reminder to all those parents as well. It's tough stuff, but great reporting, Matt. Thanks so much for clearing all that up. We do have a date where this is all supposed to begin. Let's take a look at it on the screen. Parkland school shooting, penalty phase begins June 27th. June 27th, and will last, it looks like, several months, because you've got to prove the whole case. You have to prove the whole case if you want to send the shooter to death row. Okay, when we come back, time to hear from you, our 13th juror. And I asked you today a very interesting question. And the question was, what was the biggest lie told to this jury in the building behind me? Not a whole series of them, not like, oh, everything. No, what was the one biggest lie? Your verdict when we return.
About 6 years ago, Ms. Heard made some quite heinous and disturbing, brought these disturbing criminal acts against me that were not based in any species of truth. But never did I myself reach the point of striking Ms. Heard in any way, nor have I ever struck any woman.
technology.
The next thing I remember, I was bent over backwards on the bar, meaning my chest was up. I was staring at the blue lights and my chest was on this, my back was on the countertops. And I thought he was punching me. I felt this pressure. He on my pubic bone, and I thought he was punching me. And I remember that it's just not wanting to move because I didn't know if it was broken. I didn't know if the bottle that he had inside me was broken.
That is Amber Heard testifying about that sex assault. And the question is, do people believe that that actually happened? I posted on social media what was the biggest lie told during the course of this trial. And a lot of people are saying it was that story, including our 13th juror comment of the day, which comes from Carol tonight, who says the biggest lie was that she was sexually assaulted with a bottle that did not cause her to seek medical attention. And Bremner, let me ask you the significance. If this jury all agrees that they think that story was a lie, is that the potential road to victory for Johnny Depp?
Sure. I mean, they can discount all of her testimony. On the other hand, like Rottenborn, excuse me, she shows one act of abuse and she wins. One. Why she went this far, to basically stretch anybody's beliefs that this could actually have happened and she didn't seek medical attention, I don't know. But the fact is, this is so outrageous and so unbelievable that yes, Penny, it could clearly be a path to victory.
Penny tonight, that Johnny is a gentleman who never, ever abused Amber. Michael Sterling, after reading some of those text messages, people may not think he's a gentleman. But here's someone that says never, ever abused Amber, maybe thinking that it's something less than what Amber actually described.
Yeah, Vinny, that's the other side of the coin. And, the lawyers in closing made very specific arguments. Psychological abuse is abuse. So they could be looking at that as a roadmap to victory.
Maria tonight, the biggest lie? The op-ed was not written about Johnny Depp. And Rick King, I agree that I'm not buying that it wasn't written about him, because the first draft, which had to be, edited by the lawyers, had Johnny Depp all over it.
Yeah. So, that's the crux of the case right there, man. I feel like that is the biggest lie, because that's what the Depp team is saying. This is Johnny Depp saying this is about me, and this has hurt me, and that's the way they're going.
And the truth is, the reason Amber Heard was so prominent and people were interested because she was married to Johnny Depp and because she had accused Johnny Depp of domestic violence. I mean, that's the whole hook to her being a public figure. I mean, you cannot deny that. Michael Sterling, Ann Bremner, and Rick King, thank you so much. Great to have you aboard tonight. I thought you were going to deliver me a verdict, but you didn't. Maybe we'll be here next week at the same time. Still waiting. You never know. Only the jury knows. Thanks so much. Folks, make sure you're watching first thing tomorrow morning, because as I said, a verdict can happen literally at any moment. Before we go, I have a picture to show you. This is Lucas Lopez Hernandez, just 11 years old, missing out of Dayton, Ohio. If you see Lucas, please call 911, 1-800-THE-LOST, or the Montgomery County Sheriff's Office. That's it. We'll be back here tomorrow. Have a great night, and as always, don't forget to hug the kids.
A false allegation can devastate a career.
Mr. Depp will have to prove that the words Ms. Heard used were about him and that they were false.